The screams that tore through Abu Dhabi's industrial district weren't ordinary screams. They were the final cries of a man who had run out of places to hide. You're watching someone who chose to burn alive rather than face the women whose lives he shattered. This wasn't remorse. This was a predator's last escape. What drove a smooth-talking 27-year-old to pour gasoline over his own body? How did one man's quest to escape poverty transform into a nightmare that destroyed everyone he touched? Welcome to Crime Canvas, where we examine the darkest corners of human nature. If you're new here, subscribe now because stories like this need to be told, and lessons like these need to be remembered. This is the story of Devraj. And before we're done, you'll understand why sometimes the worst monsters create their own hell. Meet Devraj. 27 years old. A face that could charm anyone. Words that flowed like honey. But behind that smile lived something cold and calculating. Devraj grew up in Dhabi, one of Mumbai's most overcrowded slums. No parents to guide him. No money to feed him. No future to dream about. Just millions of people packed into tin shacks, living among waste and desperation. Most people who grow up in those conditions remain poor but keep their humanity intact. They work hard. They help their neighbors. They stay good despite the suffering. Not Devraj. He learned a different lesson early in life. He watched kind people stay hungry while cruel people took what they wanted. In his mind, compassion was weakness. Empathy was stupidity. In 2020, he scraped together money through petty theft and bought a tourist visa to the UAE. His plan was crystal clear. Get to a wealthy city. Find a way to stay. Never return to the slums that made him feel worthless. When his 30-day visa expired, Devraj didn't leave. He simply vanished into Abu Dhabi's shadows, becoming one of thousands of undocumented workers living in constant fear of deportation. He ended up in Musafa, the industrial area where illegal laborers hide from immigration officers. 8 men crammed into rooms meant for 2. No cooling in heat that reached 48 degrees. This wasn't the life of luxury he had imagined. By day, he worked construction sites, always watching for police. By night, he plotted something bigger. He didn't just want to survive in the UAE. He wanted to conquer it. But here's what you need to understand about Devraj. His evil didn't start in Abu Dhabi. He brought it with him. Back in Mumbai, Devraj had already taken a life. Her name was Anjali. 21 years old. She worked in a textile factory for barely enough to eat. She believed Devraj when he said he loved her. She believed him when he promised they'd build a life together. When Anjali discovered she was pregnant, Devraj panicked. He couldn't afford a child. More than that, he didn't want the burden of responsibility. A baby would trap him in the slums forever. He convinced Anjali to get an illegal abortion at a clinic that operated out of a crumbling building with no medical license. The procedure went catastrophically wrong. Anjali started hemorrhaging, blood pooling beneath her as she begged Devraj to take her to a hospital. He looked at her lying there, dying, calling his name. And he walked away. Anjali bled to death on that filthy clinic floor, alone and abandoned by the man she loved. She was still calling for Devraj when her voice finally stopped. When police began investigating her death, Devraj used his last stolen money to buy that UAE visa. He told himself he was starting fresh, leaving his mistakes behind. But you can't outrun your own nature. Monsters don't transform into better people just by crossing borders. They just find new hunting grounds with fresh victims who don't know what they're capable of. Abu Dhabi became Devraj's new playground. And within 6 months, he found his first target. Lakshmi was a Tamil woman working as a domestic helper for a wealthy family. 34 years old, divorced, sending every dirham she earned back to her 2 children in Chennai. She was lonely, isolated, desperate for human connection. Devraj studied her routine for weeks. He learned where she shopped, when she had days off, who she talked to. Then he made his approach, accidental and charming. He told her he loved her. Promised marriage and a future where her children could join them in Abu Dhabi. Lakshmi wanted to believe in happiness again, so she gave him everything. Her life savings of 16,000 dirhams, earned through 3 years of backbreaking work. But Devraj wasn't finished. He convinced Lakshmi to let him stay in her cramped room in the helper's quarters. Then he started recording everything. Their conversations. Their intimate moments. Even her sleeping. When Lakshmi asked about marriage plans, Devraj showed her the videos. He threatened to send them to her employers and her family in India unless she gave him more money. Terrified of losing her job and being shamed in her community, Lakshmi borrowed from dangerous moneylenders. She stole small amounts from her employers. She even sold her only piece of gold jewelry, a necklace her mother had given her. When she had nothing left to take, Devraj disappeared with her passport and remaining money. Lakshmi was left broke, unemployed, and eventually deported back to India in disgrace. Her children never understood why their mother came home with nothing after years of promising a better life. His second victim was Salam, a 26-year-old Eritrean woman whose father owned a small coffee shop in Old Abu Dhabi. Devraj convinced Salam and her father that he was a successful investor who could expand their struggling business. He persuaded her father to take a 55,000 dirham loan, using the coffee shop as collateral. Devraj took the money and vanished within a week. The family couldn't repay the loan. They lost the coffee shop. They lost their apartment. They lost everything they had built over 15 years in the UAE. Salam couldn't live with the guilt of destroying her family. She swallowed an entire bottle of cleaning chemicals and barely survived. The poison damaged her throat permanently, leaving her voice a painful whisper. The third victim was Amira, a 28-year-old Sudanese seamstress who dreamed of opening her own tailoring business. Devraj promised to marry her and legally sponsor her visa. But first, she needed to prove her commitment by earning money for visa fees through any means necessary. For 4 months, Amira worked in ways that destroyed her spirit, handing every dirham to Devraj. When she fell ill and couldn't work anymore, he abandoned her without a word. Each victim suffered more than the last. And through it all, Devraj felt nothing. No remorse. No shame. No humanity. He kept photos and videos of each woman as sick trophies, proof of his power over their lives. In his mind, these women deserved what happened to them. They were weak. He was strong. That's all that mattered. By 2023, Devraj was ready for his biggest target yet. He wanted millions, not thousands. That's when he found Nadia. Nadia was 30 years old, extraordinarily beautiful, and devastatingly wealthy. More importantly, she was vulnerable in ways that made her the perfect target. 9 months earlier, Nadia's world had shattered. Her husband Khalid died in a helicopter accident while traveling to inspect one of their properties. Mechanical failure and bad weather combined to turn a routine flight into tragedy. Search teams found wreckage scattered across empty desert, but they never found enough of Khalid to give Nadia proper closure. Nadia and Khalid had something rare in their culture. A genuine love marriage. They met at university in London, fell in love over coffee and late-night conversations about their dreams, and convinced both families to let them marry for love instead of accepting arranged matches. For 6 years, they were inseparable. Khalid built a commercial empire while Nadia managed the financial side. They had plans for children, charity work, growing old together watching sunsets from their beach house in Saadiyat Island. When Khalid died, he left Nadia everything. 60 million dirhams in properties across Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Successful import businesses. Bank accounts overflowing with wealth. Luxury vehicles. Jewelry. A villa worth more than most people see in multiple lifetimes. But all that money couldn't fill the emptiness in her chest. Nadia's grief was consuming her. She couldn't sleep in their bed anymore, so she moved to a guest room. She kept all of Khalid's clothes exactly as he left them, sometimes holding his shirts while crying herself to sleep. She would sit in his office for hours, talking to his photographs as if he could still hear her. Her family grew concerned, but for all the wrong reasons. Her brothers, Tariq and Youssef, weren't focused on her emotional pain. In their traditional thinking, a young widow needed a husband for protection and propriety. The pressure was relentless. Every family gathering, every phone call, every visit brought the same message. It's been 9 months. You need to move forward. You need to remarry. They meant well, but their constant pushing made Nadia's pain unbearable. She was also drowning in business responsibilities she'd never had to handle alone. Khalid had managed everything, made all decisions, handled complex financial negotiations. Now she was trying to run multiple companies while learning everything from nothing. Nadia started attending grief counseling, desperate for someone who wouldn't tell her to remarry. But even there, she felt completely isolated. This was the perfect moment for a predator. And Devraj had been watching, waiting, studying her every move. The meeting at the cemetery wasn't an accident. Devraj had been studying Nadia for weeks, learning her patterns like a hunter studying prey. He knew she visited Khalid's grave every Friday after their prayers. She always went alone. She always stayed exactly 30 minutes. She always brought white roses. On a scorching Friday afternoon in September 2023, Devraj positioned himself at the cemetery. He waited until Nadia was kneeling at the grave, arranging fresh flowers with tears sliding down her face. Then he approached slowly, carrying his own bouquet. "Forgive me," he said softly in flawless Arabic. "I'm trying to find the section for accident victims." Nadia looked up, surprised. She saw a well-dressed man about her age, holding flowers and looking genuinely sorrowful. "Yes, this area," she replied quietly. "Did you lose someone too?" Devraj nodded, his eyes filling with perfectly practiced tears. "My wife. Car accident 4 months ago. I still don't know how to come here without falling apart." It was a complete fabrication. But Nadia's heart broke for this stranger who seemed to understand her unbearable pain. They talked for over an hour. Devraj was flawless. Respectful. Religious. Understanding. He introduced himself as Devraj Hassan, a Muslim convert from Mumbai who had found peace in Islam after his wife's death. Every single word was a lie. But Nadia believed him completely. They began meeting regularly at the cemetery. Devraj was patient, never pushing, always supportive. He would listen to her stories about Khalid for hours, share fabricated memories of his imaginary dead wife, and slowly build unshakable trust. After 6 weeks, Devraj asked if they could have coffee together. "Just as friends," he said. 2 broken people helping each other survive the worst time of their lives. Nadia agreed. Coffee meetings became dinner dates. Devraj was everything Nadia needed in that moment. Kind. Devout. Respectful of her grief. Never pressuring her physically. Never making her feel rushed or uncomfortable. Most importantly, he impressed her family. When Nadia finally introduced Devraj to her brothers, he was completely prepared. He had forged business documents and references from fictional Mumbai companies. He demonstrated perfect knowledge of Islamic principles and spoke eloquently about faith, family, and responsibility. He talked about wanting to settle down, raise children, build a life based on tradition and devotion to Allah. Tariq and Youssef were immediately convinced. Finally, a suitable man for their sister. Successful. Religious. Respectful. Everything they wanted in a brother-in-law. Devraj courted Nadia for 5 months. He never rushed her. Never pushed for physical intimacy. Never even tried to kiss her. He was the perfect gentleman, always speaking about marriage, children, building a proper life together in accordance with their faith. During Ramadan, as they broke fast together with her family, Devraj made his move. Nadia, he said, taking her hands gently. I believe Allah brought us together through our pain. We both lost people we loved, but perhaps that was His way of preparing us for each other. Would you consider becoming my wife? Nadia was ready. After months of family pressure, crushing loneliness, and this man's patient kindness, she believed she had found someone who truly understood her. She said yes. The wedding was small and private. Devraj insisted they keep it quiet, claiming he was still too emotional about his deceased wife to handle a large celebration. The nikah ceremony was beautiful. Just immediate family and a few close friends at the mosque. When Nadia signed the marriage contract, she believed she was beginning a new chapter of happiness and healing. She had no idea she had just signed her own destruction. For exactly 2 weeks, Devraj played the role of perfect husband. Romantic dinners. Thoughtful gifts. Gentle affection that made Nadia believe she had made the right choice. He moved into her massive villa and marveled privately at the luxury surrounding him. This was everything he had dreamed of in those suffocating slum nights back in Mumbai. But the performance couldn't last forever. Within days of settling in, Devraj started making small changes. He convinced Nadia they needed complete privacy as newlyweds, so she should dismiss her long-term household staff. He installed new security cameras throughout the property, claiming it was for their protection. He asked for access to bank accounts so he could help manage her business empire. Nadia trusted him without question. He was her husband, her partner, the man Allah had sent to heal her broken heart. 3 weeks after the wedding, Devraj's mask shattered completely. It started with silence. He stopped saying good morning. He would walk past her as if she didn't exist. When she asked if something was wrong, he would respond with cold anger that made her flinch. Nothing's wrong. Stop being so desperate for attention. Then came the criticism. Everything Nadia did suddenly became grounds for contempt. Her cooking was disgusting. Her clothes were tasteless. Her voice was irritating. The way she walked, talked, even breathed became targets for his cruelty. Look at yourself, he would say, standing over her as she sat at the dining table. No wonder your first husband tried to escape. Even death was preferable to staying married to you. The words cut deeper than any physical wound. This was the man who had comforted her grief, who had promised to love and protect her. Now he was weaponizing her deepest pain against her. The physical violence started during their second month of marriage. A brutal slap when dinner was 5 minutes late. Hair pulling when she asked questions about his activities. Shoving her into walls when she tried to call her brothers. You belong to me now, Devraj would whisper after hurting her. Your family can't save you. Nobody can save you. But the worst violation was what he did to her privacy and dignity. Those security cameras Devraj had installed weren't for protection. They were tools of control. He had hidden cameras everywhere. Bedrooms. Bathrooms. Even her private study where she used to sit and remember Khalid. He recorded everything, creating a disturbing collection of videos that became his ultimate weapon of control. Try to leave me, he would threaten, showing her the recordings on his phone. Try to tell anyone what happens here. I'll send these videos to your brothers, your friends, every business contact you have. I'll destroy your reputation and your family's honor forever. Nadia was trapped. In her culture, a woman's reputation was sacred. If those videos became public, she would be ruined. Her family would be disgraced. She couldn't risk it. Devraj used this fear to control every aspect of her existence. He monitored her phone calls, read every message, controlled who she could see and where she could go. When family called, he would sit beside her, making sure she said the right things. Tell them you're happy, he would whisper with menace in his voice. Tell them what a wonderful husband I am. The psychological torture was constant and calculated. Devraj would praise her one moment and destroy her the next. He would bring her gifts and then throw them in the trash in front of her. He would promise to change and then become worse than before. Nadia's body started showing the damage. She lost 18 kilograms in 2 months. Her hair began falling out from stress. She developed such severe anxiety that her hands shook constantly. Some mornings she couldn't force herself out of bed. Her spirit was breaking too. The confident woman who had managed multi-million dirham businesses was disappearing. In her place was someone terrified, broken, and completely dependent on her abuser for basic survival. Devraj added Nadia's videos to his collection from previous victims. He would review them like trophies, feeling proud of how completely he had destroyed another human being. But destroying Nadia emotionally wasn't enough for Devraj. He wanted her money. And he had already begun stealing it. The financial destruction began immediately after the abuse started. Devraj forced Nadia to sign documents transferring property ownership to his name. When she hesitated, he would show her the videos and make his threats crystal clear. Sign it, or your brothers will see exactly what kind of woman you really are. One by one, Nadia's properties were transferred to shell companies that Devraj controlled. Her retail businesses. Her real estate investments. Even Khalid's import companies. Everything was systematically stolen through forged documents and legal manipulation. Devraj was methodical about it. He used his marriage certificate to claim legal rights to her assets. He created multiple bank accounts under different identities and slowly transferred millions of dirhams out of Nadia's accounts. The jewelry disappeared first. Then the artwork. Then the expensive vehicles. Devraj would sell everything piece by piece, always having an excuse ready when Nadia noticed something missing. We needed to pay business expenses. Don't worry about money. That's my responsibility now. His plan was straightforward. Steal everything valuable, then disappear before anyone noticed what had happened. He had already started moving money to offshore accounts in different countries. Once he had taken everything worth taking, he would abandon Nadia exactly like he had abandoned every other victim. She would be left with nothing but trauma and shame while he started fresh somewhere else with her stolen millions. But Nadia's family was beginning to notice problems. Tariq was the first to become suspicious. During family gatherings, Nadia looked completely transformed. She had lost so much weight that her clothes hung loose. She barely spoke, and when she did, her voice was shaky and small. "Sister, are you ill?" Tariq asked during one visit. "You look so different." "I'm fine," Nadia whispered, glancing nervously at Devraj. "Just tired from managing the businesses." But Tariq wasn't convinced. His sister had always been strong, confident, full of life. This frightened, thin woman wasn't the Nadia he knew. Youssef noticed the financial irregularities. As someone who understood business, he saw that Nadia's companies were making strange transactions. Properties were being sold. Bank accounts were being closed and opened. Legal documents were being filed that made no sense. When the brothers tried to visit Nadia privately, Devraj always had excuses. She was unwell. She was busy. She was traveling. He never left them alone with her for more than a few minutes. "Something's very wrong," Youssef told Tariq. "Our sister is in serious trouble." They decided to investigate quietly without alerting Devraj. The family hired a private investigator to examine Devraj's background. What they discovered shocked them to their core. Devraj Hassan didn't exist. There was no record of him in Mumbai business circles. His investment company was completely fabricated. His religious conversion story was fiction. Even his identity documents were forged. The investigator dug deeper and uncovered the truth. Devraj's real identity. His criminal history in Mumbai. The murder warrant. And most horrifying of all, his previous victims in Abu Dhabi. The private investigator tracked down Lakshmi, Salam, and Amira. All 3 women told identical stories. A charming man who promised everything, destroyed their lives completely, and disappeared with their money and dignity. When the investigator showed them Devraj's photograph, all three women started crying immediately. "That's him," Lakshmi whispered. "That's the monster who ruined my life." The brothers also discovered the Mumbai police records. Devraj was wanted for causing the death of his pregnant girlfriend. He had fled India to escape prosecution and had been living illegally in the UAE for years. Armed with overwhelming evidence, Tariq and Yusuf confronted their sister. They arrived at the villa unannounced, pushed past Devraj's protests, and demanded to speak with Nadia alone. When they showed her the evidence, photographs of previous victims, Mumbai police reports, financial theft records, Nadia's entire world collapsed. Everything made sense now. The quick courtship. The perfect behavior. The immediate transformation after marriage. She hadn't married a man who loved her. She had married a professional predator who saw her as his biggest score. "We're getting you out of here," Tariq said firmly. "Pack your things. You're coming home with us right now." But Devraj wasn't going to let his biggest prize escape without a fight. And what happened next would make headlines around the world. After seeing the evidence, Nadia's brothers understood they weren't dealing with just a bad husband. They were facing a professional predator who had destroyed multiple women and stolen millions. This wasn't just about saving their sister anymore. This was about stopping a monster permanently. Tariq and Yusuf didn't waste time with emotions. They went into full strategic mode, treating Devraj's destruction like a military operation. They had money, connections, and most importantly, they had rage that could move mountains. The first step was gathering every piece of evidence that could destroy Devraj completely. They hired the best private investigators in the UAE, cybersecurity experts, and forensic accountants. Money was no object. They wanted everything documented. The investigators worked around the clock. They tracked down Devraj's previous victims and recorded detailed video testimonies. Each story was more horrific than the last, but the brothers documented everything. They needed the world to see exactly what kind of monster Devraj really was. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of his theft. Over 50 million dirhams had been stolen through forged documents, fake companies, and illegal property transfers. The cyber experts recovered hundreds of recordings from hidden cameras throughout Nadia's house. When they contacted Mumbai police about Devraj's background, Indian authorities immediately agreed to cooperate for his arrest and deportation. The brothers hired elite lawyers to build an airtight legal case. Every forged document, every stolen dirham, every illegal recording was catalogued and prepared for court. They weren't just seeking justice. They were preparing for total annihilation. But Tariq and Yusuf knew that legal justice alone wasn't enough. In their culture, public shame was sometimes more powerful than prison. They decided to destroy Devraj's reputation so completely that he would never be able to hurt anyone ever again. The public exposure campaign began on a Wednesday morning, and within hours, Devraj's life was over. Tariq posted the first video on Instagram, a calm, detailed explanation of Devraj's crimes with evidence attached. Yusuf followed with posts on multiple platforms in Arabic, English, and Hindi, making sure every community in Abu Dhabi would see the truth. The posts included photographs of Devraj with his real criminal history, testimonies from his previous victims, and financial documents showing exactly how much he had stolen. They didn't just accuse him. They proved everything with overwhelming evidence. The family's extensive business and social networks amplified the message. Within 6 hours, the story was shared thousands of times across every social media platform. Abu Dhabi's tight-knit communities, business leaders, mosque congregations, expat groups, all started sharing the posts and warning others about Devraj. The brothers arranged television interviews with major Emirati news channels. They appeared calm and professional, presenting evidence rather than just making accusations. They brought Devraj's previous victims to tell their stories on camera, creating powerful testimonies that nobody could ignore. International media picked up the story within days. The case had everything. immigration fraud, financial crime, domestic violence, international fugitive status. News outlets in India, the UK, and the US started covering the story, making Devraj's face and crimes known globally. The community response was immediate and brutal. Mosque leaders condemned Devraj publicly during Friday prayers. Business associations banned him from their establishments. Even the labor camps where illegal workers lived refused to hide him. The family's connections in Abu Dhabi's government and police force ensured that official action was swift. Immigration authorities issued an immediate deportation order. International police were notified. Interpol issued a warrant based on the family's evidence. The legal destruction was equally thorough. All of Devraj's stolen assets were immediately frozen by courts. The fake companies he had created were shut down. Every property transfer was reversed. Every stolen dirham was traced and recovered. Multiple criminal cases were filed simultaneously. Financial fraud, domestic violence, immigration violations, identity theft. The family coordinated with Indian authorities to ensure that the moment Devraj was deported from the UAE, he would be arrested at Mumbai airport and charged with causing Anjali's death. Within 1 week, Devraj went from confident predator to hunted animal. He couldn't show his face anywhere in Abu Dhabi without being recognized, confronted, and reported to authorities. His arrogant confidence completely collapsed. The man who had spent years manipulating and controlling women was now powerless against a family that had more money, connections, and determination than he could ever imagine. For the first time in his life, Devraj was facing consequences he couldn't manipulate, charm, or escape. The hunter had become the hunted, and there was nowhere left to run. By April 2024, Devraj was a broken man hiding like a rat in the same abandoned warehouse where he had once stored Nadia's stolen jewelry. The place reeked of motor oil and desperation. Broken windows let in the harsh desert wind, and every shadow made him jump with fear. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. His expensive clothes were now filthy rags. The confident predator who had once controlled multiple women was now terrified of his own reflection. Devraj tried everything to escape Abu Dhabi. He attempted to sneak onto cargo ships leaving for Somalia. He tried hiding in trucks heading to Oman. Every escape attempt failed. The family's network of informants was everywhere. Construction workers, taxi drivers, shop owners, everyone knew his face, and everyone was watching. His final attempt was the most desperate. Devraj obtained fake documents and tried to board a cargo vessel at Khalifa port. But Tariq's connections in port security were waiting for him. Within minutes, Devraj was surrounded by police officers. His last hope of freedom died with the click of handcuffs. They took him to Al Wathba prison to await deportation. One night. That's all that stood between Devraj and a Mumbai police station where murder charges and life imprisonment were waiting. That night in prison, using a guard's phone he bribed with his last piece of stolen jewelry, Devraj recorded a rambling 15-minute message. "You think you've won?" he said into the camera, his voice shaking with rage rather than remorse. "You think I'm the monster here? I was just surviving. These women seduced me with their loneliness, their money, their weakness." Even facing death, Devraj couldn't accept responsibility for his crimes. In his mind, he was still the victim. The next morning, during transport to the airport, Devraj somehow managed to escape his guards long enough to obtain a container of gasoline from a maintenance vehicle. But instead of using his brief freedom to run again, Devraj made a different choice. He returned to the abandoned warehouse where his nightmare had begun. Security cameras captured everything that happened next. Devraj stood in the center of the warehouse courtyard, surrounded by the ghosts of his crimes. He started talking to the cameras as if he knew the world would be watching. "You want to see a monster?" he shouted into the empty air. "I'll show you what happens when society pushes a man too far." Even in his final moments, Devraj was still deflecting blame, still refusing to see the truth about himself. He opened the gasoline container and began pouring it over his clothes, his hair, his entire body. "I never loved any of them," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Not Nadia, not the others. They were just opportunities, stepping stones to a better life." He pulled out a lighter he had stolen from his guard. "If I burn, I take my secrets with me." Those were his final words. The flames erupted instantly, turning Devraj into a human torch. He stumbled around the courtyard for several agonizing minutes, screaming as the fire consumed him. The security cameras recorded every second of his self-inflicted punishment. When the fire department finally arrived, there was nothing left but charred remains and the smell of gasoline and burned flesh. Devraj had chosen the most painful death possible rather than face his victims in court. This wasn't a tragic end. It was a coward's escape from justice. But even in death, Devraj couldn't escape justice completely. All the digital evidence remained intact. The videos of his abuse. The financial records of his theft. The testimonies of his victims. The flames that consumed Devraj's body were justice served by his own cowardly hands. He had become his own executioner, choosing physical pain over the emotional pain of facing what he had done to innocent women. In the end, evil had indeed destroyed itself. Devraj had burned in the fire of his own creation, consumed by the flames of his own making. 6 months after Devraj's death, Nadia recovered all 52 million dirhams through court orders. Every property was returned. Every business was restored. More importantly, her emotional healing began through intensive therapy and unwavering family support. Nadia established the Khalid Foundation to help victims of exploitation. She created safe houses, legal aid programs, and counseling services specifically for vulnerable immigrant women. Her story became international news, making her a global voice against immigration fraud and domestic abuse. She personally compensated all of Devraj's previous victims, giving them not just money but the validation that what happened to them mattered. Nadia's advocacy led to new laws in the UAE requiring thorough background checks for marriage visas. The Nadia Protocol became a model that other countries studied and adopted. "Evil sometimes destroys itself," Nadia said in an interview. "But justice requires our courage to stand up and fight back." Abu Dhabi became a model for protecting vulnerable immigrants. The house that was once Nadia's prison became a sanctuary for helping other women rebuild their lives. This is Crime Canvas, where we don't just tell stories, we learn from them. If this story moved you, if it taught you something about recognizing predators and protecting the vulnerable, subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Let others learn these lessons too. Evil exists. But so does justice, courage, and the power of families who refuse to let predators win. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Stay aware. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak up when something feels wrong. Until next time.